It was the night everyone still whispered about, the night they heard that scream. Maggie Harlow had been out late, picking up some last-minute groceries for her father. The old man had been feeling worse than usual lately, and the doctor wouldn't come out for anything less than a broken bone or a heart attack. So, there she was, walking the dark streets, the town clock's heavy tick echoing in the chilly evening air. The streets of Fairwater had always felt odd to Maggie. Too quiet. Like the whole place was stuck in a pause. The river that ran through the town never seemed to flow as fast as it should, and the creaking of the old wooden houses felt almost alive. She tried to shrug it off. Fairwater was old, after all. People loved telling stories about how long it had been here, how nothing ever seemed to change. That was part of the town's charm, or so the real estate agent had said. As she passed the church, the wind picked up. A sudden gust, sharp enough to rattle the loose panes in the steeple's stained glass windows. Maggie frowned, pulling her jacket tighter around herself. That's when she noticed it. The thing sitting in the mud near the riverbank. At first, she thought it was just a weird piece of driftwood, but the way it gleamed in the moonlight caught her eye. She knelt down and brushed off the dirt, revealing a dull bronze surface. It was some kind of medallion, heavy and old, with strange symbols she didn't recognize. Maggie's breath fogged in the air as she turned it over in her hands. There was something unsettling about it, though she couldn't say why. "Well, that's odd," she muttered, pocketing the thing and standing back up. She had no idea it would change everything. By morning, the whole town was buzzing. Pastor Wilkins, who had been the town preacher for nearly 2 decades, had disappeared without a trace. The last anyone saw of him was at his evening service the night before, lighting candles for the All Souls prayer. His door was wide open, his Bible still sitting on the pulpit, untouched. Maggie didn't think much of it at first. After all, strange things happened in Fairwater, and people disappeared now and then. But as she left her house to do her usual morning errands, a creeping feeling gnawed at her gut. The medallion she had found was still in her jacket pocket, heavy as a stone. As she passed the general store, old Mr. Blake called out, his voice rough from years of chain smoking. "Maggie, you hear about the pastor?" "Yeah," she replied, stopping for a moment. "Weird, huh?" "More than weird. He's the 3rd this year. That's 3 folks gone without a whisper." Maggie frowned. "3rd?" Lily from the post office and Joe, the blacksmith's apprentice, disappeared the same way. Door open. No one saw or heard a thing. A chill ran down her spine. Fairwater had its share of oddities, but this felt different. Something was brewing in the town, and she had a feeling that medallion had something to do with it. That evening, Maggie found herself staring at the bronze talisman again, turning it over and over in her hands. What was it? Why had it been buried in the mud near the river? She hadn't dared show it to anyone, not even her father. Something about it felt too private, too dangerous. And then she heard it. The scream. A long, high-pitched wail that pierced the still night air like a knife. It was coming from the direction of the church. Her heart pounded as she ran toward the sound, fear gripping her chest. When she reached the churchyard, a small crowd had already gathered. People were murmuring to each other, eyes wide with panic. Maggie pushed her way through to the front, her breath catching in her throat. The scene before her was like something out of a nightmare. Pastor Wilkins' body was sprawled across the church steps, his eyes open wide and staring at nothing. But it wasn't just that. His entire torso looked like it had been hollowed out, ribs cracked open as if something had torn its way out from the inside. "What the hell?" someone whispered. Maggie stumbled back, her hand instinctively clutching the medallion in her pocket. A sickening realization dawned on her. This was connected. The disappearances, the talisman, the horrific death of the pastor. She had found something she wasn't supposed to. Before she could fully process it, the ground beneath her feet shuddered. It wasn't a normal tremor. The earth itself seemed to groan, as if something deep below was shifting, trying to break free. Suddenly, a crack split the air, and the church steeple crumbled in on itself with a deafening roar. From the hole that opened up in the ground, a horrible noise began to rise. A low, guttural growl, like something ancient and angry was waking up. And then they appeared. At first it was just a shadow, a shape against the dim light. But soon, the creatures emerged fully from the gaping crack in the earth. Winged, bloated things with leathery skin and glowing red eyes. They moved sluggishly, but with terrifying purpose, their massive snouts sniffing the air. The crowd screamed and scattered, but Maggie stood frozen. One of the creatures turned toward her, its eyes locking onto her pocket. The medallion. It's after the medallion. She backed away slowly, her mind racing. She had to get rid of it. Somehow, the talisman was tied to these horrors, like a key that had unlocked something long buried. But where could she go? How could she stop them? As the creatures began their slow, relentless march toward the town, Maggie made a split-second decision. She bolted toward the river, her legs burning as she ran. The creatures followed, their wings flapping heavily, causing gusts of hot, rank air to blast against her back. She reached the riverbank, panting and desperate. Without thinking, she pulled the medallion from her pocket and hurled it into the water with all her strength. It disappeared beneath the surface with a soft plop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if in response, the creatures paused. Their heads tilted, snouts twitching in confusion. One by one, they turned away from her, their eyes losing their focus. Slowly, they began to retreat, lumbering back toward the crack in the earth from which they had emerged. As the last of them disappeared into the abyss, the ground shuddered once more, and the crack sealed itself, leaving no trace of the nightmare that had unfolded. Days passed, and life in Fairwater returned to its unsettling quiet. Pastor Wilkins's death was officially ruled an animal attack, though no one quite believed it. People kept their doors locked at night, and whispers of strange things lurking beneath the town spread through the taverns. Maggie never spoke of the medallion or what she had seen that night. But she knew. Fairwater was far from safe. The town might have returned to its eerie normalcy, but something was always there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed again. As she walked by the river one evening, the water unusually still, Maggie couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't buried the past completely. The town was quiet, but the quiet was full of secrets. Fairwater had always been like that, unchanging, mysterious, and ever-watching. And for as long as it stood, it would hold on to its dark truths, no matter how deeply they were buried.